So, let's talk about the executive committee. At this point, we've worked our way through darn near every single advisory committee there is. We've touched a little bit about the treasurer, because the treasurer is something that is, specifically important in its own way. But let's talk about the executive committee, because these are the ultimate decision makers in your chapter division. And let's start with the role of the chair, right? Look at that happy person. So happy, great big smile. He's just like, look at all these plates spinning on the sticks. They're spinning and I'm happy. Look at that guy, really happy. So, yeah, that is no division chair anywhere in SAF right there. What he's really thinking is, oh man, the person who twisted my arm or encouraged me, as Tom said, I'm going to thank this person when this is all over. They're going to get paid back. So, but in all seriousness, this is the chair's responsibility is to keep, if we think of each of these plates as an advisory committee, his job is, or her job is to keep them all spinning. Right? It's not to be the plate. It's not to be the plate. It's to get them moving, keep them moving, pass along those expectations, provide that work is going to be done, but not to do it his or herself. All right? And that really extends out to the entire executive committee. The executive committee is not the everything committee. And if there's one takeaway, all right, if there's two takeaways, I want that to be one of them. All right, that the executive committee is not the everything committee. There's no possible way, if looking at all these things that we're talking about, that local SAF units should be doing, especially on a state level. All right, obviously, smaller chapters, especially within a state, they're much more informal. But if we're looking at these things that SAF units need to be doing in order to really be effective, there's no way that the executive committee can do all of that. All right, they need to get those plates spinning and take care of it, not do it themselves. All right, that is not respecting volunteers' time. That is directly opposite to that. All right. The other thing, if you only remember two things of what I say, all right, that second one, if you're on the executive committee, you need to take ownership of your local SAF unit. All right. It doesn't mean that you need to be, to go back to Tom's presentation yesterday about the different, leadership and personality types. You don't have to suddenly turn into capital D, right? But you need to in your own way, take ownership of what's going on and make sure that things get done. Because ultimately, the buck stops here. The buck stops here with the executive committee. All right. So let's talk about these duties for a second. All right. The advisory committees, each of them had their own, certain focus. All right, and a relatively narrow focus. That broadens back out at the executive committee level. The executive committee doesn't have the luxury of, well, okay, I'm just going to think about membership, and membership is my thing, and anything that happens outside of membership is not my job. The executive committee does have to think broadly. How are these things tying together? So really has to take a broad view of forestry in your local SAF units area. And when I say big picture, I'm even talking about outside of SAF. What's the landscape in your area? What are our allied organizations? Where are we going? What are our biggest threats? It's got to look at the big picture, all right? And that's the reason why it can't be doing all this other stuff. It can't be, trying to figure out, which hotel is going to give us the best rates for, this winter meeting. Like, no. That's why we have a program committee. All right, it's got to take a broad view. It's got to be decisive without being divisive. And I hope, given everything that we talked about yesterday, that really shines through. Yes, this is where decisions get made. They need to get made. It can't just be task force after task force after task force. You know, those decisions need to be made, but they can be made, even controversial decisions, they can be made charitably. Okay, they can be done in a manner that, you know, you're not saying, yeah, that's a terrible idea. Like, that's the worst idea ever. That's, you know, well, no, that's not the way to really communicate a decision. You have to be decisive without being divisive. That's the way you're going to hang on to your volunteers. Going back to Ken's. Identify both problems and opportunities, all right? There may be problems that don't fit neatly inside an advisory committee, that maybe it's just not registering on their radar, you know, but you're seeing it as a larger issue. You're hearing from members because, you know, they're not calling, you know, the head of the program committee on such and such an issue. You know, they're picking up the phone and they're sending an email to the chair. You know, it's your job, okay? To be able to identify them. You know, is it a real issue? Is it a real opportunity? Because it does swing both ways. You know, yeah, there are problems, and we all know about the problems. People are not shy about the problems. But a lot of times they're also not shy about opportunities. And there are plenty of opportunities out there. Once that's been identified, charge the appropriate committee to come up with a recommendation and come back to you with a solution. In this way, yeah, you can give them some direction and say, yeah, you know, I think this is the way it needs to go, but you know what, we'll put some time into this in the next few months, you know, come back to me with a certain date and recommend a solution, and let's see how it goes. Empower them, all right? Give them hand over that, empower them. What you end up is maintaining engaged advisory committees. The committees know what their responsibilities are. You're in communication with them. They feel like they're being valued. Okay, this is pretty great. That's the key to engagement. Going back to one of the other talks. All right. Again, don't be the everything committee. Don't. How do we keep the advisory committees on task? All right. So this is all nice. All right. In a perfect world, this is how it would be. I see Susan. She's just like, oh, Steve, you're so optimistic. Yep. So let's get to two practical questions about this, because this is pie in the sky. All right. This is the ideal. All right. We should be shooting for the ideal, right? I mean, you know, let's shoot for it. And if we miss it by a little bit, we miss it by a little bit. But we got to shoot for something. This is what we're shooting for. It comes down, in my mind, to two important questions. How do we keep the advisory committees on task? How do we get buy-in from our members and our key volunteers, the people who are actually on the committees, the people who are chairing the committees? And that solution, you know, to me, is having an annual planning meeting. All right? This is something that is strictly your well, actually, let's just go through this one by one. When, who, where, how, why. All right. After the election has been concluded, which is right about now, but before the term begins. Okay, which is probably right about now, or coming up pretty soon. If you miss it by a few months, you miss it by a few months, but it's still something you should shoot for. So have it as soon as practical. Who? The executive committee. If it isn't an election year, well, that's real easy because they're the same people. But if it is a transition, you know, have as many folks as you can from both the incoming and the outgoing, and all the advisory committee chairs. All right, that is super important because that gives us continuity. All right, and that continuity, that's the benefit of being in an organization that was formed in 1900, right? If we want to say that, yeah, SAF, we're founded on the principles of Gifford Pinchot and blah, 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 blah. You know, we got 1900 on the old logo and all that good stuff. You know, well, this is the way that we preserve that continuity. yeah, it's not perfect, but you know what? We're shooting for something good. All right? Where my strong suggestion is at somebody's dining room table. Pick somebody who lives kind of centrally located, that way it can be equally inconvenient for everyone involved, and get them there at somebody's dining room table, and have this out. Gather as many of those folks as you can. Have others call in, make sure there is food and drink, because it's going to take a little while. You know, we've gone through all this stuff. Getting folks on board, that's going to take a while. You can't have people running out of energy and running out of non-alcoholic beverages. But seriously, and I'm being serious about this, you know, a glass or two of wine really help with planning. All right, more than that, not so much. All right, but seriously, getting ideas flowing and everything out of there. You know, there should be something around just to help along with that. Make sure there's food and drink. All right, why? Why are we doing this? This sounds like effort. You know, nobody's got time for that. Blah 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 blah. All right, why are we doing this? We're soliciting input. We're soliciting input from those who are most engaged. They're the ones who want to be heard, and they want to be heard about what's going on. What's going to happen in SAFs next year, all right? And the executive committee is the right people to put that together, to solicit that input directly and feed that right into the annual planning. It's also to let others know what you, all right, as the chair-elect, immediate past chair, you know, what you want to see. This is your time to communicate your vision, right? You ran for this spot. You must have a vision for why you did that, you know, other than you drew the shortest straw or you were encouraged to do it by a valued person. But, you know, you've got to share that vision, all right, even if it is something that, you know, yeah, I've got to do this. Figure out who is going to do what. Assigning tasks is really kind of the most important thing that happens at this meeting. That way, okay, you know, here's a list of things we got to get through. Here's how we're going to get it done. You know, this committee's going to do that. We'll get to that in a second. Get people thinking about how they're going to do it. All right, you get everybody together. You get some food going. You get some, you know, you get some non-alcoholic beverages flowing, and you talk it out. Okay, you know, what should our next step be? Okay, well, you know, I'm on my way out as, you know, such and such committee chair, but, you know, 2 years ago we ran into the same question and, you know, we did X, Y, and Z. Okay, all right, well, that's a good starting point. Okay, well, Y didn't really work, so, you know, we might need to find something else. Okay, perfect. But getting people thinking about how they're going to do it is critically important. And 5, making sure they have the resources to do it, which ties into Susan's talk on Treasury. All right, so before the meeting, get people thinking, get people talking, send out emails, make phone calls, get people excited. It's a new year, right? We got that good, happy feeling coming, you know, it's a new year. Hope springs eternal, and, you know, the baby with the sash, and, you know, sparkler and all that stuff, right? It's new year. People should be happy. People should be excited. This is a new time. It's a new day. You know, possibly you got new officers coming in. They should be excited about it. Start gathering up status reports about what happened in the last year, okay? I don't care if it's just an email from the previous chair of whatever advisory committee. You know, yeah, we did, you know, X, Y, and Z. Okay, great. You may have some highly motivated, detail-oriented people who send you a 10-page report and with spreadsheets and graphs and stuff like that. You never know what you're going to get until you ask, right? So, but you should have a status report about that. That way you know if you've got any problems. If you've got, you know, if you get a bunch of reports come back, yeah, we didn't do anything. Yeah, we didn't do anything. Yeah, we didn't do anything. You may have a problem. And it's good to identify that before the meeting, okay? get organized. Get organized. Does your local SAF unit have an operations manual? It might not. I would suggest that it should. And we'll get into is that right now. An operations manual should think about that as everything that, you know, Joe or Jill volunteer needs to kind of have at their fingertips in order to do their job. Okay? So things like, I don't know, the bylaws of,
No.
you know, your chapter or something, huh?
Bylaws shouldn't be in the operations manual.
Well, it should be somewhere. I mean, people should know where to find it, right? So a list of officers and committee members, that's something, okay? You gotta, you know, it really helps if you've got people's phone numbers, you know, handy, okay? So that's good. Most recent budget, okay? That's something going into a meeting like this. Yeah, you should definitely have. Committee charters, job responsibilities, annual work plans. These are things that, you know, might be buried in a box in somebody's basement and may not have seen the light of day in a few years. It doesn't mean that it's not unimportant, okay? Just because it hasn't been dusted off in a while, you know, that may be a symptom of poor leadership rather than, yeah, this is not important to me, all right? Because it helps to know what a committee is chartered to do, what they are charged to do by the executive committee. At what point would one committee start stepping on another committee's toes? You know, little details like that, it's good to know ahead going into there. Key documents that they need to refer to or pass along to others, this is the right time to do it. This is how we maintain transition. All right, so let's take this meeting, let's take the annual planning meeting, and we're going to break it down into 3 sections.